As y'all will remember, if you were here last week, we finished up the book of Genesis. It's taken us all this time since we started back on September 7th to get through Genesis. And at the end of the book of Genesis, we have a situation where there's a famine worldwide. And so Jacob and his family end up moving down to Egypt where there's food. Hey, come on in, y'all. And so at the end of Genesis, then you have the whole people of Israel in Egypt in a really good situation because the Pharaoh is really positive towards them because of his assistant Joseph, who's one of the sons of Jacob. And so that's kind of where you end. Everything seems really good at the end of Genesis, and then bang, we're going to hit the beginning of Exodus. Things are going to turn pretty dark pretty fast for the Israelites. So let's jump in at that point in our story. Welcome. Come on in. Hey, good to see y'all.
Hey, y'all.
No, you're good. We were just about to start. So we're going to look at the Exodus from slavery, the first 15 chapters of the book of Exodus this morning. So some of the themes, some of the things that we're going to touch base on is the significance of the actions of women in the story. We're going to look at the flawed character of Moses as a person who is called by God. We're going to look at the inscrutable character and the holy name of Yahweh, which is always printed in English as the Lord, capital Lord, all in caps.
I always thought Yahweh had two A's in it, Y-A-H-W-A-Y.
That's a good question. So this is how it's written in Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
And in the original Hebrew text, there are no vowels.
Yeah, that's true.
Anywhere. Vowels didn't exist.
That's true. I remember.
And so then later on, people had to figure out what they thought the vowel marks should be, and those were entered later on.
Right.
And so when you see me put up words that are in Hebrew, sometimes they'll have little dots or things like that. Those are the vowel marks, okay? Because originally it was just consonants. So in the text, as we have it, that's the name of the Lord. That's God's personal name. But Alice, you're right. When scholars write it out, they write Y-A-H-W-E-H. Yahweh. Okay.
That's like Wales. They have all vowels, all consonants too.
Yes. And then we're going to talk about the cruel character of Pharaoh, the new king of Egypt, and the ambivalent character of the Hebrew people. And this is going to be a theme that is going to pretty much continue through the rest of the Hebrew Bible, is this incredibly ambivalent nature of the Hebrew people in relationship to God. Okay, welcome, Scott. Thank you. So we'll start right here. Now, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase. In the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew, that is the Israelite midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. These are two of my favorite characters in the whole Bible. Everybody's familiar with them, I'm sure, right? When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. Mm-hmm. But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. I just want to pause there. Like, these midwives are total nobodies. You know, they're like the midwives of the slaves. And the greatest person in the land, the most powerful person, gives them clear and direct instructions. And it's basically civil disobedience, right? They disobey him clearly. So The king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and allowed the boys to live? So he sees what they're doing, right? The midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they're vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So they lied to him. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. The Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. Now, a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. So these are Hebrews, Israelites. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him for 3 months. So she's committing civil disobedience as well. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to the child.
That's Moses, right?
Hey, you're one step ahead of us, Alice. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. This must be one of the Hebrews' children, she said. Now, obviously, she knows that her dad wants all those males killed.
Yeah.
But is she going to follow her dad's wishes? No. Then the child's sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, this is so clever, shall I go get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, yes, that's a good idea. So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child, her own child, and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because, she said, I drew him out, Masha, of the water. So let's just briefly talk about the whole setup for all of Exodus is only possible because of these women, right? It's so interesting. Shiphrah and Puah, these two midwives who disobey Pharaoh, commit civil disobedience, they lie to Pharaoh. Think about the guts that must have taken, right? The courage, the willingness to fear God over your own well-being in front of the most powerful person in the land. Moses' mother, she's very sneaky and insightful and smart about what to do. Moses' sister, being the one who kind of is the go-between between Pharaoh's daughter and Moses' mother, and then Pharaoh's daughter. Right? So just remarkable that the whole setup, it's only because of these women and their courage and their wiliness and their intelligence and their cleverness and all of that. So if you're ever looking for interesting, positive portrayals of women in the Hebrew Bible, like you got 5 of them right here in starting.
I don't think Moses' mother actually disobeyed Pharaoh. She did throw Moses into the Nile.
True.
He didn't say that they couldn't get it.
True. It was she went by the letter of the law. There we go. All right. So I'm going to just go through a bunch of stuff that happens. This isn't biblical. This is just me summarizing. As a grown man, Moses is living in Pharaoh's household, but he's aware that he's of Hebrew origin. When Moses sees an Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave, he is outraged. He intervenes and beats the Egyptian to death. It's interesting that the same word for to beat is used in Hebrew, both for what the Egyptian was doing to the Hebrew slave and for what Moses does to the Egyptian. So it's like he's doing tit for tat. The next day, Moses sees 2 Hebrew slaves in a violent argument with each other, and he intervenes to stop them from fighting each other. So it's interesting because in the one case, he sees oppression and he intervenes on the side of justice. Here, he sees 2 people acting violently to each other, and they're of the same social standing. And he's not about violence. It's not like he wants violence. He stops them from being violent towards each other, right? The one who started the fight tells Moses that he was seen killing the Egyptian the day before,
Mm.
alerting Moses that his deed may be known by others. Because at that point, he thought maybe he'd done it and nobody saw.
Mm.
And indeed, when Pharaoh finds out, he seeks to have Moses killed. So Moses flees to the land of Midian. And there, right away, like one of the very first things that happens is that, hey, Jacob, Moses proves to be brave and righteous. He protects some vulnerable women right away. So we begin to see different dimensions of his character. Right? On one hand, he can be violent when he sees oppression happening, and he can stand up and even kill someone. But he can also be someone who tries to stop violence and someone who protects vulnerable people. So all that we're going to see continues to be this kind of complex, flawed character. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. Their cry for help rose up to God from their slavery. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. So let's just talk briefly about the character of Moses. He's a child of Hebrew slaves. He grew up in wealthy society. He stands up to those committing injustice, but he intervenes to end violence. As a known murderer, he's got to flee for his life.
Mm.
And in God's character, if we think back, like some of the stuff we talked about earlier, the portrayals of gods in other cultures were pretty interesting. They were often very juvenile. They were very petty. They were very concerned about themselves. Here, we're being given a portrayal of a God who hears the cries of the oppressed Hebrew slaves and actually pays attention. God is faithful to the covenant made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which all the Hebrew people are now inheriting. So I think we have to pause and just recognize that this is a seminal moment to recognize that the God that the Jewish people are in relationship with is in fact a God who cares about people who are suffering. A God who does not primarily just care about God's self, but actually pays attention in history to oppressed people and the needs that they have. And we're going to see is going to act on their behalf. So this is a portrayal of God that is unlike many other cultures' portrayals of God. And it's really easy for us not to think about that because we're so invested in the whole Christian tradition that talks about the nature of God in a particular way. But so many other cultures do not portray God or the gods as caring about human beings, and especially caring about the vulnerable and the oppressed. And this dimension of the deity is going to be something that will be an ongoing theme for the rest of the Hebrew Bible and then on into the New Testament. So this is a very important, fundamental vision of the nature of God within first the Jewish tradition and then later the Christian tradition.
But Ron,
And yes.
are people talking about their gods in the same time frame in a disparaging way? Or not a disparaging way, but and not saying that they do have, feelings for, vulnerable. Is it the same time period?
Yeah, yes.
So what would be the other religion that was?
It's part of what we're going to see in later on. We're going to see that Hebrew people are commanded to go into the promised land. And this is going to be a problem with the nature of God. That's why it's going to be an inscrutable God. Because on the one hand, God is loving towards the oppressed. But when they go in, God's going to tell them to kill the people that live there. So that the Hebrews, aren't influenced by the visions of God that those people have, which are very different. Yeah. So people at this same time have gods that couldn't care less about the people.
Mm.
Right. And remember, were you there the first, I think it was first or second week where I talked about that Babylonian creation myth, where the woman is cut in half to create the world. That's a whole different sensibility about the nature of the divine than we get from the Jewish people. And I can't overstate how significant it is to have this vision of God guiding any tradition. Okay. All right. So Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. So he'd married a Midianite woman. he led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him. I'm just going to make one little comment because it's hard to translate it when we're, it's like the Lord sounds like a title, right? But it's Yahweh. So it's a name. So it would be like, the angel of Jan, right? The angel of this individual God. The Lord sounds like such a title, right? But in the Hebrew, you hear it as a name. The angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When Yahweh saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Holiness is dangerous. That's one of the things we're going to see. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings. So, and it's like he observes, he hears, he knows. It's like taking it to heart, essentially. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. Now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He said, I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, if I come to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, well, what's his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, Yahweh, which means I am who I am. Or it can also equally mean I will be what I will be. So it's an interesting word, and then it has a present tense and it has a future tense. Okay.
Why doesn't it have a past tense?
What do you think? It's interesting because this same God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They're all in the past. But in the New Testament, it's really interesting. When someone is talking to Jesus about the resurrection, Jesus says, these people who are talking to him don't believe in the resurrection, right? But Jesus says that God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am only the God of the living. They have been raised. They are living now. So I don't know exactly the answer to your question, but there's clearly always a reference to the past in Judaism, always.
Yeah.
Like the past matters. But it's almost like the past matters insofar as it has to do with how are you doing, what are you doing now? And what will you do as a community? But I don't know the right answer, like in terms of the linguistic issues of why it's not past. I just know that's like, those are the two senses it can have. Now, before I read any further, I just want to share something a rabbi once said to me, to a whole group I was with. I just found it fascinating because we were all like, well, why the name Yahweh? And he said, try to think of a desert people and just the most fundamental sound Imagine someone breathing. Yeah. And I was like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like this fundamental thing about breath, which we're told that God breathed into the first human. And that the breath was spirit. Breath and spirit are the same thing. It's really interesting. So that's God's name. I am who I am. Or I will be what I will be. He said further, thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. You know, we talk about the great I am sometimes in church. This is a reference to it. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, thus you shall say to the Israelites, the Lord, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, okay, so past, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, not my title, right? I want to just keep coming back to that. It's not just a title of Lord. It's a proper name. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations. But Moses is still not convinced that he's the one to do this thing. Moses said to the Lord, to Yahweh, oh my Lord. So here in English, when you're reading the Bible, you're going to see that Lord is used twice right beside each other, but they're totally different words in the Hebrew. But if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it in English. But you know that because it's all caps here, it's the proper name. And here, if you're reading along in Hebrew, you see that it's Adonai, okay? Which basically means the title Lord. So it's like Lord Yahweh, almost, right? Lord, Lord, Lord the Lord.
When we see God, is it Elohim?
Sorry?
And when it says God, is it
God,
is it Elohim?
It's usually Elohim or it could be Adonai. I have never been eloquent. This is Moses speaking. Oh my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor even now that you have spoken to your servant. But I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. And the Lord said to him, who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, Yahweh? Now go, I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak. But he said, oh Lord, please send somebody else. Now, here we go. Well, how's God going to respond? Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, what of your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Even now he's coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. And I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. He shall serve as a mouth for you. So I find it curious that Aaron is not the one chosen, okay? Yeah. Even though Aaron can speak well, for some reason Moses, this crazy, passionate guy who's all mixed up in all kinds of ways, is the one who's chosen. Even if he needs a mouthpiece to say the words. God chooses in interesting ways. Okay, so I'm just going to make a few observations. So Moses, at this point, he's a fugitive working as a shepherd. Like he's got no importance on any political scene. He's just like a lowly shepherd. Like he's like a mechanic in Troutman. Okay, like that would be the equivalent. Just like I work in a mechanic shop up in Troutman. When he experiences a theophany, what they call a theophany, on Horeb, the mountain of God. A theophany is an encounter with the divine. Okay. When God calls him by name, Moses replies, here I am. And this is going to be a formula we're going to hear over and over and over again when prophets are called by God. God's going to speak to them and they're going to say, here I am. I'm available, I'm present. I may not like what you're going to tell me. And usually the prophets don't like what God tells me. It's not a pleasant thing to be a prophet in Judaism, right? But God comes to them and they're like, okay, here I am. God identifies himself as God of the ancestors and reiterates that he's aware of the suffering of the Hebrew people. God commands Moses to confront Pharaoh. Moses replies, who am I? A little shepherd, just doing my thing in Midian, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt. So he feels inadequate. He feels unprepared. He doesn't have the authority. We're like, who is he to go do this, right? In response, God reveals God's name. So we talked about that. And confirms that he's the same God who made a covenant with the ancestors. If I'm a Jew and I'm reading the text, when I come across the word Yahweh in the Jewish text, in English, we translate it obviously into the Lord, and we just say the Lord. If I'm a Jew reading the text out loud and I come across this word, I substitute Adonai every time.
Ooh,
This word is too holy to be on human lips.
oh, okay.
So no human is ever to speak that word. And so you see the word in the text, you don't read it, you say Adonai instead. Oh, which means the same as Lord. Right? But that's why, like, I find it like it's unfortunate in English that we translate it as the Lord because we lose the personalness of it. Right? Anyway, so here we go. Moses then says, in addition to every other reason for God not to send him, that he's impaired, slow of speech, slow of tongue. Despite God's reassurance, Moses directly says to God, let somebody else do this. And God is fed up, right? Nevertheless, God provides Moses with his brother Aaron to speak for him. So again, we've talked before about how Yahweh is a character in these narratives, right? And so he has emotion. He gets angry. He gets fed up. He also feels love. He feels regret. He remembers things. Like he's a character. And in some ways he's unpredictable because he's a character. Just like humans can be unpredictable. So it's a long way from the Greek idea of God as omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, all these things that's like static. Now this God is like active, is invested. Okay. Moses went back to his father-in-law Jethro and said to him, please let me go back to my own people in Egypt and see whether they are still living. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. The Lord said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all those who are seeking your life are dead. The kings died, all those people that wanted to get even because he killed the are dead. So Moses took his wife Zipporah and his sons, put them on a donkey, and they went back to the land of Egypt. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let my people go. Well, Moses is probably like, well, thanks a lot. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. Interesting. I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But you refuse to let him go. Now I will kill your firstborn son. So Yahweh is saying, you didn't let my firstborn go. So Pharaoh, I'm going to kill your firstborn. Okay. On the way, at a place where they spent the night, the Lord met Moses and tried to kill him. Is that what you expected to happen? This is so weird. And then it gets weirder. But Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin, touched Moses's feet, probably meaning genitals, with it, and said, truly, you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So God let him alone. Then the Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he went, and he met him at the mountain of God. Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord which he had sent him. Then Moses and Aaron assembled all the leaders of the Israelites. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses and performed the signs in sight of the people. The people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had given heed to the Israelites and that he had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. Okay, a few observations. Moses, family, he follows family protocol. He goes back to his father-in-law. Is it okay if I leave? Yes, you have my blessing. The Lord gives Moses an understanding of what's to come. I already went over that. He's going to tell Moses to free the Israel. The Pharaoh's heart will be hardened by God. We're going to come back and talk about this whole issue about hardening of Pharaoh's heart, because it's a very interesting dimension of the story. Previously, the Lord had referred to the Israelites just as my people, but here he calls the Israelites his firstborn. God is establishing a familial connection, which really honors the Israelites, to say, you're my family. And we're kind of used to that because we think of ourselves as God's family, sons and daughters of the dawn and all that. But that's not really what had been set up so far. They were his people, but not like his firstborn, right? Not his family. So this is an interesting move that Yahweh is making. So this sets up this quid pro quo that we talked about. Because Pharaoh won't let God's firstborn go, Pharaoh will lose his own firstborn. Now, that's passage. The Lord meets Moses and seeks to kill him. That's so enigmatic. Jewish tradition holds that it may have been because Moses had not shown spiritual leadership in his family. He clearly hadn't circumcised his own son. And to keep the covenant, you were supposed to circumcise your son. And so God is so angry that he hasn't circumcised his son. Even though God's called him, God nevertheless is ready to kill him for his failure. So Zipporah circumcises the son and then brings the little foreskin and puts it on his genitals. And somehow that blood makes Yahweh happy. It's kind of hard to understand, y'all. I mean, let's just, so because it's hard to understand, I went to like one of the preeminent biblical scholars of our generation, this guy named Walter Brueggemann, okay? And I'm just going to read a little bit of what Brueggemann wrote, because I couldn't make terrific sense of this. And we can see how much sense he can make of it. So he says, God seems to take action against those most treasured. The best we can do is to let the narrative witness to the deep, untamed holiness of God. There is no hint that God is testing or measuring Moses, but only that Yahweh, see how you spelled it there, Alice?
Yeah.
But Yahweh
Okay.
operates in inexplicable, undisciplined freedom. To be present at all in Yahweh's story is a high-risk venture for Moses as well as for Pharaoh. The response that rescues Moses from the terror of God is as odd as the terror itself. Zipporah circumcises her son in a crude way and touches the bloody foreskin to Moses' genitals.
I'm surprised there's no infection going on there.
Brueggemann continues, after her act, Zipporah issues a verdict, giving Moses yet another identity, this time as a bridegroom of blood. By this curious act, Moses is made safe from the inscrutable threat of Yahweh. We are dealing with a story built around the resolve of this Holy One who will not be tamed or explained. There are provisional strategies for safety in the face of holiness. Holiness is going to be this theme that's weird in the Bible. We think of it in a particular way, but the Bible thinks of it in a way that's different than we usually think of it. Okay. But none of these strategies will finally tame this danger. One is struck at the end of this brief encounter with the peculiar juxtaposition of the threat and safety, a resolve to kill and safety found only in a primitive act of blood and genitalia. But then holiness is perplexing beyond all explanation. It's a great conclusion that Brueggemann, one of the greatest Old Testament scholars, gets. Holiness is perplexing beyond all.
And you got another woman acting in this.
I do. Good point. She saves the whole Exodus story. So it's all the women that set it up, and this woman keeps it going. Good point. All right. So there you go. I don't know what to do with that story. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh And they said, thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness. But Pharaoh said, who is Yahweh, that I should listen to him and let Israel go? I do not know Yahweh, and I will not let Israel go. That same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people, you shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks as they have made previously. Do not diminish it, for they're lazy. Well, we often hear that, right, about people. They're just lazy. Okay. The Lord said to Moses, you shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of this land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and I will multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. When Pharaoh does not listen to you, I will lay my hand upon Egypt and bring my people, the Israelites, company by company, out of the land of Egypt with great acts of judgment. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a wonder, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did as the Lord had commanded. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a snake. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same by their secret arts. Each one threw down his staff, and they became snakes. But Aaron's staff swallowed up all of theirs. However, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh and say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to say to you, let my people go, so that they may serve me in the wilderness. But until now you have not listened. Thus says Yahweh, by this you shall know that I am Yahweh. See, with the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water that is in the Nile, and it shall be turned to blood. The fish in the river shall die. The river shall stink, and the Egyptians shall be unable to drink water from the Nile. Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh and all of his officials, they lifted up the staff and struck the water in the Nile. All the water in the river was turned into blood, and the fish in the river died. An interesting thing about the Bible and about Hebraic way of saying things is that they tell you what they're going to do, and then they repeat the same thing again. And you get to hear it again. Like it's not a simple, well-edited narrative. It's often repetitive, but that's very typical Hebraic way of doing things. The river stank so that the Egyptians could not drink its water, but the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and he did not take even this to heart. Okay, so there's both theological and political things that are going on in this text. Yahweh clearly identifies with the slaves, revealing a concern with questions of power and politics, with a clear bent towards justice for the disempowered and the oppressed. Can anybody explain to me why when I turn this off so it won't ring, it always still rings? Something's going wrong with it. Anyway, so God clearly identifies with the disempowered and the oppressed against their oppressors. Pharaoh, the supreme political leader, is commanded by God to let the Israelites leave his dominion so that they can worship Yahweh in the wilderness where he has no dominion. Okay. Pharaoh refuses, replying that he doesn't know Yahweh, which has a dual meaning. One is he's not familiar with this particular deity, and he doesn't recognize the authority of that deity. Okay. In Moses and Pharaoh's first encounter, most translations say that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Now, in English, that conveys becoming stubborn and cruel, I think. That's how we hear it. The Hebrew verbs used here and in subsequent verses don't really mean what we think of as hardened in English. Instead, they could be more literally translated as his heart grew heavy or unresponsive or became resolute. Okay. Those have slightly different feel to them. Whether translated as hardened, heavy, unresponsive, or resolute, the Hebrew word suggests an unwillingness to change a course of action or an attitude towards the Hebrew people, despite the pleas and the warnings that he's given by Moses and Aaron. So the pattern of plagues is repeated. Moses and Aaron warn Pharaoh of another plague, like the one of the blood in the Nile, but his heart remains unresponsive, resolute, and he will not let the Hebrews go. There are more plagues in this pattern: frogs, gnats, flies, death of livestock, boils, hail, locusts, and darkness that covers the entire land. And finally, the death of every firstborn Egyptian child, male. An interesting dynamic in the text between these verb forms. Sometimes Pharaoh's heart becomes heavy, unresponsive, resolute. At other times, he makes his own heart heavy, responsive, or resolute, unresponsive, or resolute. And at times, the Lord makes his heart. So that, like, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes he does it to himself. Sometimes Yahweh does it to him. It's curious. So we're just going to go through and see how it plays out with each of the plagues. With the blood, Pharaoh's heart was resolute. With the frogs, Pharaoh made his heart heavy or unresponsive. So here it's just like that's what his heart was. Here it's like he's actively doing it. Gnats, his heart was resolute. Flies, Pharaoh made his heart heavy and unresponsive. Livestock, the death of the livestock, his heart was heavy, unresponsive. Boils, the Lord made Pharaoh's heart resolute. Hail, Pharaoh made his own heart heavy, unresponsive. Locusts, the Lord made Pharaoh's heart heavy and unresponsive, and the Lord made his heart resolute. So here's both of those words from the Hebrew. Darkness, the Lord made Pharaoh's heart resolute. Death of the firstborn, the Lord made Pharaoh's heart resolute. So you can see it becomes more and more what the Lord is doing as time goes on. So this, again, I'm going to quote Brueggemann. I was having a hard time figuring out what to say about it. So looking at this episode through a lens that is both theological and political, Brueggemann writes, what is God doing in this story? What is God doing in the world? This story holds no brief for an easy kind of supernaturalism that imagines God will swoop in and cause freedom. Rather, the Exodus is wrought slowly, painfully, through hurt and risk. The notion of hardening the heart suggests that God unleashes increasing injustice, stubbornness, and resistance to change, so that the old order must give way to God's new intention. If a benign status quo can be maintained, nothing will ever change. Only when brutality escalates to an unbearable level can genuine newness, public newness. So this is an interesting way of thinking about what's going on here. And it's interesting to relate it to various societies throughout history, where you get more and more oppression, and finally something radical happens that changes things. It's fascinating. So it has not only the theological thing of what God is doing, it also has the political dimension of this whole society getting like forced into change because things are so bad. The Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague upon the Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Sorry, I'm just going to check the time because I'm going to overkill. Okay. I will bring one more plague upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward, he will let you go free from here. Indeed, when he lets you go, he's going to drive you away. Okay. Moses said to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, about midnight, I will go out through Egypt. So this is what the Lord is saying the Lord will do. Yahweh, I'm going to go throughout Egypt, okay? Every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the firstborn of the female slave who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the livestock. That's a lot of death. Then the Lord said to Moses, this month shall be the first month of the year for thee. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th of this month, they are to take a lamb for each family. You shall keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembled congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the lamb that same night. This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of Yahweh. I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human to animal. I am who I am. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So every year, one of the major gatherings among Jews to this day is Passover. And this is where the word Passover comes from.
Yep.
So it becomes foundational event within like Jewish life across the centuries. To this day, yeah, I just said this, sorry, I'm thinking ahead. So has anybody been to a Seder? Many people? So you kind of know this interesting pattern. They walk through the whole story, even the 10 plagues. And when there's the 10 plagues, you take a drop of wine for each plague and you set it on your plate so that your plate then has 10 little drops of wine around it to remind you of all the death that took place, all the disaster that took place.
And my mom and dad went to one, but I haven't.
Yeah, well, it's a moving experience. So they simulate, people eat hurriedly on that fast, how they ate on that first Passover night. That's why we have matzah, for example, right? It's unleavened bread. You don't get it time to rise. You have to eat the unleavened bread because you're doing it in a hurry. It's a night on which Jews call to mind the terrible actions that led to their own freedom. And on this night, they also remember all peoples across the world who are still oppressed. That's really interesting. It probably means that at least in some Jewish communities this year, one of the communities that was mentioned was the Palestinians. Very interesting. I've been to lots of Seders, and it's interesting to hear the oppressed communities that get mentioned, And I find it really meaningful that part of their consciousness of their own past oppression makes at least many Jewish communities, maybe not all, but many Jewish communities, very conscious of the oppression of communities in their own time, which has changed over the years, right? But in their own time.
Can you say which communities could be mentioned today? Maybe as an example.
Well, I mean, one that often gets mentioned is the LGBTQ community. Yeah. And then I mentioned Palestinians might have been mentioned this year. And I think you could think of the people who are living in the Sudan right now, who are going through so much unbelievable suffering. So you could pick. You can't mention everything, obviously, but usually
Ukraine.
you can. Yeah, sure, exactly. People think of particular areas in which oppression is happening, and they'll mention that. So, as a result, for Jews today who are concerned about the oppression of Palestinians, Passover can be really morally complex. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. So this is interesting. A moment ago it was the slave girl, and now they go for a different person who's like at the bottom of the prisoner, right? Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. You just stop and think about that. Everybody Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, rise up, go away from my people, both you and the Israelites. Go, serve Yahweh as you said. Take your flocks and your herds as you said, and be gone. And ask a blessing from me too. We're kind of pointing at the very end there. When the king of Egypt was told that the Hebrew people had fled, the minds of Pharaoh and his officials were changed towards the people. And they said, what have we done? Let Israel leave our service. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites who were going out boldly. The Egyptians pursued them and they overtook them camped by the sea. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to Yahweh, and they said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. But Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance that Yahweh will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. Yahweh will fight for you, and you have only to keep still. So, character of Pharaoh, unjust, cruel, resolute, unresponsive to the suffering of the Hebrew slaves. Yet he grieves when for his own people's losses, sets the Hebrews free, he regrets it. So he's resolute in some ways, but he's changeable in others. The character of God hears the cries of the oppressed Hebrew, sends devastating plagues, and causes the death of firstborn Egyptians, makes Pharaoh's heart heavy or unresponsive and resolute in opposing the Hebrews' liberation. This is complex. This is like inscrutable. Holiness is inscrutable. That's like one of the themes that you're going to get in the Hebrew Bible. The character of the Hebrew people, shaped by enslavement and oppression, yet they're fearful and wary, complaining to Moses when their situation in freedom seems perilous. And Moses has to show faith in God and leadership in reassuring them of God's faithfulness. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind. We've all seen, is it Charleston Heston that does this in the movie? Whoa! By a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on the right and the left. So they walked through on dry ground. The Egyptians pursued them and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses and chariots and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, Yahweh looked down on the Egyptian army and threw the Egyptian army into a panic. The Egyptians said, let us flee from the Israelites, for Yahweh is fighting for them against Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and chariot drivers. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn, the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, Yahweh tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered what? The chariots and the chariot drivers once again. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea, and not one of them remained. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the Egyptians. So the people feared Yahweh and believed in Yahweh and in his servant Moses. Then the prophet Miriam, a woman again, we're going to end with a woman. Okay, you started with women, we're going to end with a woman. Then the prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and with dancing. And Miriam sang to them, sing to Yahweh, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. So a few observations to wrap it up. The Lord is a warrior on behalf of the Hebrew people. This aspect of his character will become prominent in the coming books of the Bible. It's going to be a complex thing that God is a warrior. Okay. God is a warrior fighting for the Hebrew people, which in a way looks good, but a lot of people have to die because the Lord is a warrior for the people. It's gonna be, like for our sensibilities, it's complicated. This generation of Hebrews witnesses mighty acts of the Lord on their behalf, and they will pass this remembrance down to future generations. And so I would say that in some ways, this is the event that fundamentally shapes all Jewish identity down to this day, more than any other single event. It's this event. And at a Passover Seder, part of what's like insisted upon is that the next generation learn all this story, and it gets passed on from like it's so important. It's fundamental. Many scholars consider Miriam's song to be the oldest poetic text in the entire Hebrew Bible. It may have been composed at or very soon after the time that the actual events took place. So, a woman's praise to God may be the oldest original words that we have in the Bible. Okay, next week we're going to move on. And we're going to look going into the wilderness and the law. What time is it? See if we have time for.
40,
Yeah, we got like
43.
34 minutes. Any comments or questions or thoughts after all that?
Some of the firstborn women, because my interpretation always was, and I actually knew this story with me, that it was a firstborn male, but
That's what I thought too. That's my
it's
sense.
just firstborn.
It
you
just says
wrote-
firstborn,
So-
but typically, if it's a girl, she doesn't matter. You knew I'm saying that facetiously.
No, yeah, of course I did.
A long time ago, when Pharaoh said that the firstborn of Egypt was to die, that included Moses. Why wasn't Pharaoh as the firstborn of his family not taken?
You mean in the, so I think what it means is no adults are going to be taken,
Okay,
only the firstborn that are children still. I think that's what it means.
Or the Passover. You know, that saved them.
no, but I mean, Pharaoh should,
Pharaoh's the
firstborn of
oldest of his family.
Oh,
What I'm saying is because he was an adult, none of the adults were killed. It was only the firstborn children that were
Maybe,
still children that were killed.
maybe, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it's interesting that, Moses was a shepherd, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then later David,
Yes, it is interesting.
and then Jesus is a good shepherd, so he's,
And God appears to the shepherds too,
yes.
you know? Yeah. And it's this part of it, I think that's a really interesting point, because part of it is this ongoing theme in the Bible that God doesn't see with the same eyes that we see. And so even in the story of David, for example, all of David's brothers who are taller and more beautiful and, you know, like more powerful, they come out and it's like, no, it's not that one, it's not that one, it's not that. Do you have another brother somewhere? No, there's not.
Yeah.
You know, they're sheep, you know?
yeah.
And so it's this theme, and in the shepherds in the nativity story, you know, the shepherds are out taking care of their flocks by night. They're nobodies. You know, the angels could come to like some prominent civilian or something. No, it comes to the shepherd. So it's this theme about how does God see, right? And God sees the people and pays attention and cares about people that we think are of no importance, because God sees things that we don't see. Yeah, so that's a great point.
Does Aaron keep speaking for Moses, or is that only his?
Aaron and Moses are going to have a really contentious relationship, and we're going to talk about that next week. That's part of what happens is like Moses is like a god guy, okay? Aaron is like, he ends up like really creating opposition to Moses within the Israelite community, and he becomes a problem in a lot of ways. And he's really not as much of a God guy as Moses is. And then you look back and you say, oh, I see why Aaron wasn't chosen. Because even though Moses has got his issues, right, he's a God guy. And Moses, and Aaron is not.
He didn't make excuses not to Aaron.
No, what he's gonna do next week is he's gonna make the golden calf. He's gonna create all kinds of problems.
It's perfect.
So, yeah. So, okay, anything else? Thank y'all. We'll continue. We'll be back in the other room next week.